Hey guys, Sean Klinger with Vital MX. We've done a 450 and 250 motocross shootout, but now we have a 2019 450 cross-country bike shootout with KTM and Husqvarna. They have had their cross-country bikes for quite some time. Yamaha and Honda are a little bit newer. Sherco is brand new. This is the first year that they have had a cross-country bike. We're going to be riding these bikes in some tighter terrain, some single track, some GP courses, sand track, motocross track, just to see how all these bikes do in lots of different terrain. This video is going to be an overview of how the bikes do and how they compare. Kind of a summary. If you want a more in-depth view, please go to vitalmx.com to see the full test with rider opinions. For more videos, go to our YouTube channel, and thanks for watching. Brand new for 2019, the Sherco 450 SCF is the first dedicated cross-country bike that this French company has ever produced. Rather than making a motocross bike that is more off-roady, the Sherco is based on their enduro race bike with more moto-like changes for fast-paced off-road riding. Yet it is clear after riding the Sherco that it has a different definition of cross-country than we do. First off, none of our testers felt that the SCF was bad or had any glaring weaknesses. It's just that overall, it is clear that the Sherco is designed for much more technical and slower speed terrain than we would consider cross-country. The motor has an old-school chuggy character that was pleasantly torquey and very usable on the trail, but as things opened up, the power fell off abruptly after the mid-range. The bike prefers to be short-shifted and has 6 gears to help with that. The KYB fork and shock are a departure from WP, which is Sherco's typical choice of suspension components. For technical, slow-speed riding, the suspension is extremely comfortable and soaks up rocks better than any other bike, but even after playing with the clickers trying to get more hold-up, the Sherco couldn't really handle fast hits, rollers, or whoops. Combine the overall soft suspension with a very flexible chassis and you have a bike that works great in rough, low-speed riding, but starts to feel unstable and unpredictable at aggressive paces. Motocross is doable, but not necessarily that fun on the Sherco, owing to the lack of hold-up and lack of throttle response. The bike's ergos are also deviate from what we consider to be normal feel. The bars are very low and the peg to seat distance also seems short, so standing on the bike is a little awkward. It's much easier to ride the Sherco seated and flick it back and forth grass track style rather than standing and charging. Overall, we are happy to have ridden the bike and it isn't that far off from the other bikes in the shootout. Plus, if this test was conducted in the South or East Coast, might be higher on the list. In 4th place, the Honda CRF450RX actually received mostly 3rd place votes, but nothing higher. When looking at all the bikes in this category, the Honda RX is the most similar to its motocross brethren. There are dedicated suspension and engine settings, an 18-inch rear wheel, a larger tank, but the transmission is the same as the R version, and it's noticeable from the first crack of the throttle that the ECU changes are very minimal. Across the board, testers said that the RX has the most MX feeling motor, with a torquey immediate power delivery and strong pull throughout the RPM range. But this also makes the RX harder to ride and control in tricky trail conditions like rock gardens and slow speed repeated S-turns. The suspension settings are also the most motocross-like. The Showa coil spring fork and Showa shock are high on the performance scale and work better and better the faster and harder you ride the RX, but are pretty low on the comfort side. The Honda takes more effort to ride and beats you up a little bit if you aren't charging full speed ahead. Handling-wise, the chassis has a very similar feel to the R, which is stiff but precise. The RX is a quick-turning bike, which is helpful in single track, but can feel unstable at times, and the larger tank's width pushes your legs wider than usual when going through tight, rutted corners. Overall, the Honda CRF450RX has us the most happy on the motocross track, wide open riding, and even moderately techy trails, but if you spend more time slicing through trees, the RX might be more aggressive than you want. The Husqvarna FX 450 had the widest spread of scores, including a 1st place ranking. This landed the bike in 3rd place, not far off from the Yamaha. Again, the Husky features the updates that the Moto version received this year, plus a larger tank, 18-inch rear wheel, semi-wide transmission, and off-road suspension and engine settings. Because of their similarities, it is natural to compare the Husky with KTM, which there are noticeable differences. The FX's engine, while matching the overall power characteristic, is both mellower yet freer revving than the KTM. Testers said that they felt less engine braking and a lively feel to the power, yet it had less torque character down low. This makes the FX's power very usable in a wide variety of off-road conditions, yet a little lackluster on the motocross track. The suspension follows suit by having a slightly softer, more trail-oriented feel than the KTM. That being said, everyone felt that the Husky was the most light, the slimmest, and the most agile feeling bike in the Shootout, giving it great handling and overall flickability on the trail. But as we move farther from first place, there are a few more negatives to mention. The Magura front brake is subpar compared to the previous Brembo setup, and while the seat has massive grip, it is also quick to cause a case of monkey butt. Overall, the Husqvarna FX 450 does really well in tight to moderately fast trails, but is a little soft for wide open GP racing or serious motocross track time. The 2019 YZ450FX comes in a very close second place with only 3 more points in the KTM. Like many of the bikes in the Shootout, the YZFX carries over all of the upgrades made to the motocross specific model. These changes were focused on making the bike overall slimmer, getting a better chassis feel, and changing the engine's cases for the electric start. Specifically, the FX model gets a larger tank, a fuel light, 18-inch rear, specific engine mounts, 5-speed wide ratio transmission, and a specific ECU and suspension settings. The word that kept coming up when discussing the YZ's performance was stability. The chassis is extremely predictable, and combined with plush but capable suspension, the YZ can handle anything that the trail throws at it. But overall, most testers found the YZ450FX to be more of a handful in super tight terrain than some of the other bikes. The Yamaha does feel a little wider and just a hair heavier when trying to change directions quickly. In the motor department, the engine character is very similar to its motocross brother. Quick revving, great throttle response, exciting delivery, yet it has less torque feeling and is a little mellower overall. Add this to a very wide 5-speed transmission and the YZ450FX felt a little too tame for some of our testers. But with the Power Tuner app, you can get the power to behave pretty much any way you want. For some testers, this was their perfect 50% trail, 50% track bike, but for the majority, the YZ450FX felt a little short in tight single-track riding conditions. With the lowest overall score, the 2019 KTM 450 XCF takes the win in this cross-country bike shootout. This year, the XCF received all the upgrades and changes that the Moto model debuted earlier this year. That includes a new, more rigid chassis and a lighter and overall smaller engine. To separate it from the motocross bike and make the XCF a more off-road capable machine, it has a larger gas tank, 18-inch rear wheel, semi-wide ratio transmission, and dedicated ECU and suspension settings. Overall, most testers praised the KTM for its slim, agile feel and lightweight, which makes the bike very easy to turn, and it also feels like a smaller bike than a 450. That being said, while the motor isn't the most aggressive in the Shootout, the KTM's power is strong, linear, and very tractable. There's plenty of bark to get up and over trail obstacles, as well as feeling pretty normal for a 450 on the motocross track. The WP, AER 48 fork, and WP shock, as mentioned earlier, have overall softer settings to allow the KTM to absorb rather than deflect sharp hits on the trail, which it does very well. There's a solid balance of comfort and performance with this suspension, meaning it isn't so soft that it's bottoming out all the time, and it isn't so stiff that front and rear wheel traction become an issue. While there are more aggressive and more mellow bikes in the Shootout, when looking for a 450 cross-country bike that can perform in tight single-track, fast-flowing trails, in the sand, and even a motocross track, the KTM 450 XCF checks the most boxes for R6 testers.